Meanwhile, the military authorities looked facts in the face and had a different tale to tell. They complained that in various parts of the country, especially in the mountain districts, they were unable to obtain men. Lee reported that his army melted away before his eyes and asked for an increase of authority to compel stragglers to return. At the same time, Brown was quarreling with the administration as to who should name the officers of the Georgia troops. Zebulon B. Vance, the newly elected governor of North Carolina, and an anti-Davis man, said to the legislature, "It is mortifying to find entire brigades of North Carolina soldiers commanded by strangers, and in many cases our own brave and war-worn colonels are made to give place to colonels from distant states." In addition to such indications of discontent, a vast mass of evidence makes plain the opposition to the conscription toward the close of 1862 and the looseness of various parts of the military system. It was a moment of intense excitement and of nervous strain. The country was unhappy, for it had lost faith in the government at Richmond. The blockade was producing its effect. European intervention was receding into the distance. One of the characteristics of the editorials and speeches of this period is a rising tide of bitterness against England. Napoleon's proposal in November to mediate, though it came to naught, somewhat revived the hope of an eventual recognition of the Confederacy, but did not restore buoyancy to the people of the South. The Emancipation Proclamation, though scoffed at as a cry of impotence, nonetheless increased the general sense of crisis. Worst of all, because of its immediate effect upon the temper of the time, food was very scarce and prices had risen to indefensible heights. The army was short of shoes. In the newspapers, as winter came on, were to be found touching descriptions of Lee's soldiers standing barefoot in the snow. A flippant comment of Benjamin's that the shoes had probably been traded for whiskey did not tend to improve matters. Even though short of supplies themselves, the people as a whole eagerly subscribed to buy shoes for the army. There was widespread and heartless speculation in the supplies. Months previous, the Courier had made this ominous editorial remark: "Speculators and monopolists seem determined to force the people everywhere to the full exercise of all the remedies allowed by law." In August 1862, the governor of Florida wrote to the Florida delegation at Richmond, urging them to take steps to meet the nefarious smuggling of speculators who charged exorbitant prices. In September, he wrote again, begging for legislation to compel millers, tanners, and salt makers to offer their products at reasonable rates. As these men were exempt from military duty because their labor was held to be a public service, feeling against them ran high. Governor Vance proposed a state convention to regulate prices for North Carolina and by proclamation forbade the export of provisions in order to prevent the seeking of exorbitant prices in other markets. Davis wrote to various governors urging them to obtain state legislation to reduce extortion in the food business. In the provisioning of the Army, the Confederate government had recourse to impressment and the arbitrary fixing of prices. Though the Attorney General held this action to be constitutional, it led to sharp contentions, and at length a Virginia court granted an injunction to a speculator who had been paid by the government for flour less than it had cost him. In an attempt to straighten out this tangled situation, the Confederate government began late in 1862 by appointing as its new Secretary of War James A. Seldom of Virginia, at that time high in popular favor. The Mercury held his advent with transparent relief, for no appointment could have seemed to it more promising. Indeed, as the new year, 1863, opened, the Mercury was in better humor with the administration than perhaps at any other time during the war. To the President's message it gave praise that was almost cordial. The temper was short-lived, however, and 3 months later the heavens had clouded. There were in all 6 Secretaries of War: Leroy P. Walker until September 16, 1861, Judah P. Benjamin until March 18, 1862, George W. Randolph until November 17, 1868, Gustavus W. Smith temporarily until November 21, 1862, James A. Seldom until February 6, 1865, General John C. Breckinridge, again for the government, had entered upon a course that consolidated the opposition in anger and distrust. Early in 1863, the Confederate government presented to the country a program in which the main features were 3. Of these, the 2 which did not rouse immediate hostility in the party of the Examiner and the Mercury were the Impressment Act of March 1863, amended by successive acts, and the act known as the Tax in Kind, which was approved the following month, though the Impressment Act subsequently made vast trouble for the government. At the time of its passage, its beneficial effects were not denied. To it was attributed by the Richmond Whig the rapid fall of prices in April 1863. Corn went down at Richmond from $12 and $10 a bushel to $4.20, and flour dropped in North Carolina from $45 a barrel to $25. Under this act, commissioners were appointed in each state jointly by the Confederate President and the Governor, with the duty of fixing prices for government transactions and of publishing every 2 months an official schedule of the prices to be paid by the government for the supplies which it impressed.